Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly into a world where the walls of a farmhouse conceal marble staircases, where money flows like groundwater beneath villages, and where a single man can vanish from daylight for over a decade while still commanding respect. We're talking about Michele Zagaria, the banker in the bunker of the Casalesi clan, 2011. You probably won't survive this world unless you've got nerves stronger than concrete and a ledger sharper than a blade. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're tuned in right now, post your location and your local time down below. I love seeing where everyone is listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The story begins not with explosions or sirens, but with a quiet, worn-down town in Campania, Casal di Principe. Children dart between alleys, their sneakers scuffing dust from uneven cobblestones, the air thick with the smell of frying peppers and laundry detergent drifting from open balconies. Michele is one of those children, chasing a ball through cracked courtyards, his laughter echoing in a place that already knows the weight of silence. For decades, Casal di Principe has lived under a shadow so familiar it feels like part of the architecture. The Camorra isn't a visitor here. It's family. It's the invisible hand guiding who gets work, who doesn't, whose shop thrives, whose shutters close forever. He grows up breathing it in, though perhaps not yet naming it. In his family kitchen, coins are counted with the same care as prayers whispered before meals. The rhythm of survival here is economic as much as it is spiritual. Michele watches how adults exchange favors with a nod, how an envelope slipped into the right palm can solve a bureaucratic nightmare faster than any official stamp. Even at 7 years old, he senses the unwritten rules. Respect runs deeper than law. Loyalty is heavier than truth. Italy in the 1960s is reshaping itself. Booming industry in the north, heavy migration from the south, a nation still grappling with post-war scars. In Caserta province, where his childhood unfolds, opportunities are scarce, wages are low, and the pull of alternative economies is magnetic. For the Camorra clans, this is fertile soil. Families already linked to smuggling cigarettes across the Mediterranean adapt quickly to heroin routes, extortion, and construction contracts. The elders of his neighborhood joke that brick and mortar are as good as blood, a phrase Michele files away without realizing how literally he will embody it years later, building his underground bunkers. Picture him as a boy walking home from school, his satchel heavy with textbooks he barely opens, yet his eyes already scanning street corners the way a banker studies graphs. He notes who drives what car, who's hanging laundry in silence, who dares to laugh too loudly. A teacher once scolds him for daydreaming, unaware that the boy is already calculating something beyond multiplication tables, how power distributes itself invisibly, how fear shapes behavior more than laws ever could. One light joke to keep the air gentle. You could say Michele was the kind of kid who'd rather balance a ledger than ride a bicycle, though his parents probably wished for the opposite. Childhood games meant less than the hum of adult conversations around him, voices lowered when names too important or too dangerous came up. And yet, amid this constant undercurrent, he's still just a boy. He runs errands for his mother. He kicks a ball against cracked plaster walls, and he sneaks bites of fried dough cooling on the kitchen table. But unlike most of his classmates, he already understands that the real lessons aren't in the classroom. They're in the whispered deals between his uncles, in the respectful silence his father shows when certain figures pass on the street. By the time he turns 12, Michele has learned to measure life not in grades or games, but in debts and favors. The rest of Italy might imagine childhood as a time of innocence. Here, it's an apprenticeship in survival. And as the years unfold, the town's invisible rulers tighten their grip, ready to welcome him into their fold. Michele's birth in Casal di Principe ties him to a landscape that feels timeless. Flat farmlands stretching outward, punctuated by the geometry of citrus groves and the rigid outlines of half-finished concrete buildings. The town is neither glamorous nor anonymous. It is a place where everyone knows the sound of everyone else's footsteps, and family names weigh heavier than passports. He grows up in a house where the shutters stay closed longer than necessary, where the conversations pause when neighbors walk too close to the door. From the first days of his childhood, Michele breathes in the paradox of Casal di Principe, poverty visible in peeling walls, wealth hidden in armored cars that roar through narrow streets. The adults rarely discuss openly who controls the flow of money and fear, but children hear enough. They notice how the shopkeepers bow their heads a little deeper when certain men enter. They notice which families suddenly repair their houses after a night of hushed meetings. Michele notices most of all. His family roots are woven into the soil of Campania. Farmers on one side, small traders on the other, they are not poor by the desperate standards of southern Italy, but neither are they secure. What they do have is kinship, a web of cousins, uncles, and godfathers whose reputations stretch like protective walls. For Michele, these bonds are as important as bread on the table. In a town where legal institutions barely flicker in relevance, kinship is survival. Historical fact anchors this picture. The 1960s and early 1970s see the Camorra transform from scattered gangs into organized clans. Antonio Bardolino begins shaping what will become the Casalesi network, laying the foundations for international smuggling and construction rackets. Michele, still just a boy, sits on steps with his cousins while hearing names like Bardolino whispered with reverence. To outsiders, these names mean little. To Casal di Principe, they mean destiny. School offers little refuge. He attends a modest building with fading paint and rattling windows, where teachers battle to keep order while the allure of quick cash outside the gates grows stronger every year. Michele learns his letters and sums, but the lessons that matter most arrive after class. He watches his older cousins trade contraband cigarettes by the roadside, neat packets hidden beneath jackets. The mathematics of profit prove more compelling than the fractions scribbled on the blackboard. One afternoon, as the story goes, Michele lingers by the corner shop, watching a man in a suit emerge from a black car. The shopkeeper, who usually scolds children for loitering, suddenly beams like a gracious host, offering free sweets to Michele and his friends just to keep them quiet while the man steps inside. That moment stamps itself into Michele's young mind. Respect is currency. Fear can sweeten candy. Law is flexible if your reputation is strong enough. It is in these small encounters that his character begins to form. He is not reckless. He is observant. He does not chase fights in alleyways. He listens. He does not daydream about escaping the town. He imagines what it would take to control it. He sees family dinners as classrooms. His uncles tell stories laced with innuendo, and Michele notices which parts are met with laughter, which with silence, and which with cautious nods, a gentle joke to soften the heaviness. Michele probably understood poker faces before he understood multiplication tables. Children in Casalesi Principe learn quickly that knowing when not to speak is a survival skill worth more than gold. Many people still think that Michele's early years were shaped only by chance, that he was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, destined to absorb the clan's influence. But so, what do you think? Is destiny just geography? Or was he already crafting the mindset of a man who could vanish into bunkers and still orchestrate empires? By the time adolescence begins to cast longer shadows, Michele's roots are firm. He is Casalesi Principe through and through, loyal to his family, shaped by silence, and marked by the invisible fingerprints of the clan's growing empire. His childhood, instead of being an innocent playground, is the soil where seeds of loyalty, cunning, and ambition are quietly sprouting. Family roots in southern Italy stretch like stubborn olive trees, twisting through soil that remembers centuries of struggle. Michele Zagaria's own family is no exception. His parents are not kings of the village, but they are far from invisible. They belong to that middle ground of respectability, never hungry enough to seem desperate, never powerful enough to be untouchable. It is within this middle ground that Michele learns the balance between humility and ambition. His father works with diligence, eyes always scanning for chances to lift the family out of mediocrity. His mother, watchful and devout, insists on routine prayers at the kitchen table, even as she knows the same hands that fold for prayer will eventually count folded banknotes. Michele, a boy seated at her side, sees devotion and calculation coexisting like two halves of the same coin. Extended relatives orbit the household. Cousins drop by with stories too polished to be truthful. Uncles arrive with smiles that never quite reach their eyes, bearing gifts for Michele that feel extravagant compared to the family's modest means. A new football, a crisp shirt, or a wristwatch too fine for a teenager. These are not ordinary tokens. They are breadcrumbs leading him toward a world where generosity is always an investment. Historical fact roots this period. In the late 1970s, Campania becomes a hub, not only for the Camorra, but also for broader networks of organized crime. Smuggling routes run from Naples to Marseille, from the Mediterranean to Northern Europe. For a boy like Michele, kinship ties are more than family. They are access points to a rising underworld economy. His relatives' connections place him in the outer rings of conversations that would shape the Casalesi clan's fortunes. At family gatherings, Michele notices which cousin commands respect without raising his voice. He notices how his father lowers his tone when speaking of friends who live in large villas beyond town. The unspoken map of power becomes clearer with every meal. For him, Sunday dinner is less about pasta and more about studying the hierarchy hidden between clinking glasses. And yet, this is still a boy's world. Michele is not yet hardened. He laughs when cousins jostle him in the courtyard. He sneaks away to chase fireworks during festivals. But unlike them, he remembers every story, every slip of an adult's tongue. Family is not just warmth, it is archive. And he, quietly, is archiving it all. One evening, an older cousin jokes that Michele listens like a priest in confession. Everyone laughs, but the truth lingers. The boy absorbs everything. This memory becomes a kind of family lore. Even as he grows, relatives remind him, "Don't just stare, Michele. Take it all in." He does, a light joke, slipped in for gentleness. Some kids collected stickers. Michele collected secrets. His scrapbook was filled not with cartoon heroes, but with whispered names and stories of who owed what, who controlled which street, and who disappeared after debts went unpaid. It is in these years that Michele learns the first law of his eventual career. Family is both shield and trap. Shield, because the web of relatives gives him protection, a network of allies ready to vouch for him. Trap, because every favor carries weight, and every cousin's debt becomes his shadow. Do you remember the day he first realized money carried memory? At a cousin's wedding, envelopes stacked high on a silver tray, Michele saw faces stiffen or brighten, depending on the thickness of each gift. Loyalty, he realized, is measured in paper, not just blood. That moment stayed with him far longer than the music or the confetti. By the time adolescence folds into youth, Michele understands that family ties are the invisible scaffolding of his life. They will raise him upward, but they will also bind him tightly. He is no longer just a boy watching his elders. He is preparing, almost unconsciously, to become one of them. The schoolyard of Casal di Principe is not the cheerful playground outsiders might imagine. The walls are cracked, the asphalt uneven, and the chatter of children carries undertones of rivalry that mirror the adult world outside the gates. Michele spends his early school years learning more from observation than from textbooks. He is clever enough, capable of memorizing lessons, but his focus lingers elsewhere. In classrooms, teachers insist that diligence and study are the keys to freedom. Yet Michele looks around and sees the obvious contradiction. The boys who excel academically rarely advance beyond the same provincial constraints. Meanwhile, those who carry themselves with the quiet swagger of certain family names already wield more influence than any diploma could provide. He learns quickly that loyalty counts more than grades. A historical fact grounds this. In Italy, during the 1970s and early 1980s, national education reforms attempt to create pathways for upward mobility. In the poorer South, however, the gap between theory and practice yawns wide. For many families, organized crime offers quicker returns than years of schooling. Michele sees this tension play out daily. Teachers urging patience and effort, while his peers' older brothers earn small fortunes driving shiny cars through narrow lanes. One afternoon, during recess, Michele witnesses a scuffle between two boys. It is not fists that decide the outcome, but the invocation of a surname. One boy mutters his uncle's name, and instantly the fight halts. The other, pale-faced, withdraws. The lesson is carved into Michele's mind. Lineage is more powerful than muscle. He carries this realization home, where his own father's advice emphasizes discretion over bravado. "Let others shout," his father says softly, "but remember who they answer to." Michele internalizes this wisdom. He does not crave the center of attention in the schoolyard. Instead, he practices stillness, listening carefully, learning to let silence become his weapon. There are moments when his intelligence peeks through in class, an essay written with unusual clarity, a quick solution to a math problem. Teachers notice, but they also note his detachment. Michele is polite, never disruptive, but his eyes often drift toward the window, where the real education seems to be unfolding. Light humor gently slipped in. Michele was the kind of student who could ace an assignment but forget to bring a pen, as though the details of school mattered far less than the drama playing outside. Many people still think that his quiet nature in the classroom reflected shyness, but others, especially those who knew his family, suspect he was already learning to calculate, watching which alliances mattered and which loyalties could be traded. So what do you think? Was he a boy lost in thought, or already a strategist in training? In the afternoons, instead of lingering over homework, Michele follows cousins to hidden corners of the town. Cigarettes pass between young hands, not for smoking, but for sale. Tiny profits accumulate, teaching them arithmetic lessons sharper than any chalkboard. Michele rarely leads these ventures, but he always keeps tally. He notes who owes, who pays late, and who lies about their earnings. Numbers are his comfort zone. By the time his teenage years begin, the schoolyard has taught him truths no textbook could hold. Loyalty outweighs intelligence, silence outweighs speeches, and the right family name can end a fight faster than any punch. Michele walks home each evening with this knowledge tucked away, ready to serve him far more faithfully than his report cards ever will. First brushes with the clan economy do not arrive with fanfare. They arrive quietly, as if slipping into his pockets unnoticed. Michele is a teenager now, tall enough to be mistaken for older, clever enough to keep his mouth shut. The streets of Casal di Principe hum with opportunity, if one knows where to look, or rather, if one knows whom to follow. Cigarettes, smuggled in crates from foreign docks, become his first taste of commerce outside the classroom. The practice is simple. Older boys deliver cartons to hidden corners, younger ones carry packets in backpacks, and shopkeepers buy them at prices impossible to resist. Michele doesn't need to be the one making deliveries. His talent lies in counting. He tallies the flow, keeps track of what goes missing, and notices which boys skim profits when they think no one is watching. Before long, his cousins trust him to keep the notebook no teacher ever asked him to maintain. Historical fact anchors this moment. Through the 1970s and 1980s, contraband cigarettes formed the backbone of Camorra earnings. Ships unloaded in Naples, and entire clans thrived on smuggling, with Casalesi figures playing key roles in distribution. Michele's initiation into this trade is hardly unique. It is, in fact, a rite of passage in his town. But his approach is different. Where others boast about quick money, Michele watches the larger picture. He recognizes that cigarettes are not just goods. They are training wheels for something bigger. They teach logistics, supply chains, and above all, the art of loyalty. He learns that every carton moved safely owes its passage not to luck, but to layers of protection. Protection comes from names whispered like passwords. There is one afternoon he remembers clearly. A shipment goes missing. The boys panic, but Michele's calm questions trace the gap back to a single unreliable cousin. Instead of accusing him publicly, Michele quietly adjusts the books, smooths the loss, and tells no one but the elder who trusted him. The elder nods. It is a small gesture, but in that nod, Michele recognizes his first taste of power. Not flashy, not loud, but in being trusted with truth others cannot handle. Family dinners shift subtly after that. When adults talk about business, Michele is no longer shooed away. He is invited to pour wine, to sit at the edge of the table, and to listen. Each story is part lesson, part warning. He learns of routes across Spain, of payments hidden in construction contracts, of favors owed by politicians. These conversations would overwhelm most teenagers, but for Michele, they are a second education. Light humor slipped gently into the narration. While other kids kept allowance money in piggy banks, Michele would probably have preferred a safe, complete with a double ledger. One for parents, one for reality. Do you remember the day he slipped his first earnings into his mother's hand? She frowned, knowing exactly where it came from. but she said nothing. Instead, she folded the note quietly into a drawer. That silence was not approval, but it was not rejection either. It was acknowledgement. And that acknowledgement gave Michele a green light stronger than any spoken blessing. Many people still think that Michele's teenage ventures were minor diversions, mere experiments in rebellion. But evidence suggests otherwise. These early encounters with contraband were deliberate stepping stones, the foundation of a role he would expand into one of the Camorra's most sophisticated financial managers. So what do you think? Was he just a boy dabbling in easy money, or already rehearsing the discipline of a banker who would one day hide fortunes underground? By the end of his teens, Michele knows the rhythm of the clan economy. Cigarettes may be small change compared to the billions that would later pass through his hands, but they are his apprenticeship. He now understands the essential lesson. Money moves where trust flows, and trust is worth more than any crate of smokes. Mentors arrive in many forms, some with stern hands, some with sly grins, and some with reputations heavy enough to silence a room. For Michele, it is older cousins and family friends who first extend the invitation into deeper waters. They are not professors in lecture halls, but their lessons are no less structured. They show him how to keep a promise, how to demand respect without raising a voice, and how to see profit in places where others see only risk. These early mentors are not simply criminals. In their own circles, they are businessmen. One cousin runs a transport company that on paper moves fruit and vegetables. Michele learns that trucks can carry more than produce, and invoices can be rewritten to balance two truths at once. He is fascinated by the elegance of it, not the danger, but the math. The ledger, once again, is where his imagination settles. Historical fact anchors this picture. In Campania during the 1980s, the Camorra clans were diversifying. Construction, waste management, and agriculture became fronts for laundering money. Young men like Michele, with patience for numbers, were rare commodities. The Casalesi did not only need muscle, they needed minds. Mentorship shapes his confidence. One elder explains the unwritten rule. Violence draws police, but balance sheets draw no one. Michele takes this to heart. He sees how his mentors keep a low profile, dressing modestly, speaking sparingly, but carrying the weight of invisible authority. The irony is not lost on him. In a culture that celebrates flamboyant mafiosi in films, the real power rests with men who look unremarkable in a crowd. There is a story of Michele riding in a truck late one night, sitting beside an older relative. The road is quiet, headlights slicing through the dark. His mentor tells him, "Numbers are safer than guns, but remember, both can kill." Michele smiles faintly, the kind of smile that will later become his trademark. Polite, controlled, unreadable, he begins to apply these teachings in small ways. At a neighborhood card game, while others bluff with gestures, Michele keeps mental track of every bet. By the end of the night, he can predict who is in debt to whom. He doesn't brag, he simply stores the information. It is practice, and practice becomes instinct. Gentle humor here, just enough to soften. While other teenagers daydreamed about scooters or girlfriends, Michele probably dreamed of a calculator with extra memory. Many people still think that his mentors merely exploited him, using a boy's sharp mind for their schemes. But others argue he was a willing student, absorbing every lesson because he already knew where he wanted to end up. So what do you think? Was Michele a pawn, or already shaping himself into a player? By his early 20s, The boy who once balanced cigarette profits in a notebook now begins to glimpse larger patterns. Mentors trust him with thicker envelopes, longer columns of numbers, and subtler conversations. He is no longer just a listener at family dinners. He is slowly becoming a participant. Do you remember the moment when he first caught an error in an elder's account? It was minor, a misplaced decimal, but he corrected it politely. The room went silent. Then laughter broke out. "The boy's got eyes sharper than ours," someone said. From that day forward, Michele was not just the quiet one in the corner. He was the apprentice banker of a clan that would one day entrust him with its empire. The Casalesi clan rises during the years when Michele is stepping out of adolescence. What was once a loose gathering of smugglers and neighborhood strongmen is transforming into a structured empire. At the heart of it stands Antonio Bardolino, a visionary don who understands that money, not bullets, builds dynasties. Bardolino expands the clan's reach across Europe, weaving alliances that stretch far beyond Campania. For a young man like Michele, watching from the wings, it feels like history unfolding in real time. The clan's name becomes synonymous with both fear and wealth. In towns across Caserta province, construction sites spring up under their watchful eye. Entire neighborhoods know that bricks rise because the Casalesi allow them to rise. Michele, walking through these half-finished structures, feels the hum of potential. He imagines ledgers filled with numbers, each floor representing a hidden account, each window frame a transaction. Historical fact grounds this moment. During the 1980s, the Casalesi clan established itself as one of Italy's most powerful criminal organizations, rivaling Cosa Nostra in influence. Their fortune came not only from smuggling, but from infiltrating legitimate businesses, especially construction and agriculture. Michele studies this carefully. To him, it is proof that criminal empires do not merely imitate corporations. They become corporations. In the small circles of relatives and mentors, Michele begins hearing Bardolino's name like a distant drum beat. The Don is admired for his cunning, his ability to avoid unnecessary bloodshed, and his vision of international reach. Michele, though still junior, feels a pull toward that model. He does not fantasize about being a street boss barking orders. He imagines himself as the architect behind the scenes, orchestrating flows of money too vast for others to follow. There is one evening when he overhears an uncle telling a story of Bardolino's dealings with Spanish partners. Michele listens as if to a bedtime tale. What captures him is not the glamour, but the mechanics. How profits are divided, how trust is enforced across borders, how one man's vision can transform contraband into empire. It strikes him like revelation. This is not chaos. This is strategy. And yet, with power comes violence. The clan's ascent leaves casualties in its wake. Michele notices funeral processions that pass through town more often than weddings. He observes the quiet grief of mothers, the silent glances exchanged at church, the way people step aside when certain cars approach. It reinforces the lesson his mentors drilled into him. Money flows best when violence is restrained, but the threat of it is always near. Gentle humor, woven softly. Michele may have been one of the few teenagers in Casal di Principe who could describe an ambush in terms of financial inefficiency. For him, every bullet wasted was a line of profit lost. Do you remember how he watched those half-built houses rise, imagining them as columns in a balance sheet? That was the mindset of a man who saw architecture not as shelter, but as a ledger made of concrete. Many people still think that Bartolino's influence shaped Michele completely, that without the Don's vision, the younger man would never have found his role. But others argue Michele had the instincts already. Bartolino simply provided a model to refine. So what do you think? Was Michele a product of his time, or a man who would have found the banker's path no matter the context? By the late 1980s, the Casalesi are no longer just a clan. They are a system. And within that system, young Michele Zagaria is already learning where he belongs. He is not content to be a pawn in street battles. His eyes are fixed on the quiet empire being built with bricks, signatures, and numbers. Michele steps into the role of a young operator during the final years of the 1980s, when the Casalesi clan is hitting its stride. He is no longer the quiet boy scribbling in notebooks. He is now being trusted with errands that matter, small assignments that serve as gateways into the heart of organized business. While older men carry pistols and dictate orders, Michele carries a ledger, a phone number, or a sealed envelope. In Casal di Principe, such tasks mean far more than they appear. The first taste of organized smuggling routes excites him not because of the danger, but because of the intricacy. Cigarettes still circulate, but heroin and cocaine are replacing them as the currency of empires. Michele listens as men discuss shipments moving from Spain to Naples, from South America to Northern Europe. For the first time, he grasps that the clan's reach is global. His job is not to move the goods, but to keep the numbers straight, to ensure that debts and promises align with the clan's honor. Historical fact grounds this. The 1980s saw Italian crime syndicates link tightly with Colombian cartels and Spanish ports. The Camorra, especially the Casalesi, positioned themselves as crucial intermediaries. Michele's assignments fit neatly into this larger story. He becomes a piece of the machinery connecting his small town to distant shores. There is a moment when he escorts a driver carrying a hidden load across the province. The man behind the wheel is nervous, drumming his fingers on the dashboard, but Michele is serene. He checks the list of stops, verifies the timing, and reassures the driver with quiet precision. It is not bravado, it is logistics. When they arrive safely, the elder overseeing the route nods in satisfaction. Michele has proven he can be trusted with movement, timing, and discretion. But it is not only drugs and cigarettes that catch his eye. Construction contracts, transport companies, and farmland sales all run parallel to the illegal trades. Michele recognizes the genius of diversification long before it becomes fashionable in the business press. For him, smuggling routes are not just about moving goods. They are practice for running complex, interdependent systems. One evening, over wine, a senior figure tells him, "You got the head of a banker, not a soldier." Michele accepts it as compliment. He does not crave the blood-soaked glamour others might chase. He craves control, order, and the quiet satisfaction of balance sheets that sing with profit. A gentle joke for the hush of the night. If some young men dreamed of football stardom, Michele probably dreamed of inventing an abacus that could count faster, just to keep up with the clan's earnings. Do you remember how he once balanced the loss of a missing crate by shifting debts from one cousin to another? That ability to patch holes in the fabric of business makes him invaluable. Already, whispers in the clan identify him as the one who can fix the books without showing the seams. Many people still think that Michele's rise was inevitable, that he was simply carried by the wave of the clan's expansion. But others point out that dozens of young men had similar opportunities. Most vanished in prison or in shallow graves. His survival owes as much to his intelligence as to luck. So what do you think? Was he just in the right place at the right time? Or did he craft his place with deliberate precision? By the close of his 20s, Michele Zagaria is no longer an apprentice. He is a young operator who understands roots, debts, contracts, and above all, trust. He is becoming the banker of tomorrow, one ledger entry at a time. Money becomes the language Michele speaks most fluently. By the early 1990s, his role inside the Casalesi clan is no longer about errands or silent observation. It is about keeping the pulse of wealth. He knows who owes, who pays, who delays, and who cheats. In a world where fear silences voices, money speaks louder than threats. Michele is its translator. His mastery of books, debts, and hidden ledgers begins with simple arithmetic, but grows into an art. He develops a way of balancing accounts that allows him to disguise the sources of revenue while ensuring the clan's leaders always receive their share. Where others see chaos, he sees symmetry. Piles of banknotes look to him like rows of numbers waiting to be sorted into meaning. Historical fact anchors this picture. Italy in the early 1990s reels from political upheaval, the Tangentopoli corruption scandals, and the collapse of traditional party structures. For the Camorra, this is fertile ground. Construction projects tied to new political arrangements need financing, and criminal networks step in to fill the gaps. Michele learns that the clan's survival depends not only on smuggling, but on embedding itself into legitimate contracts. He refines techniques his mentors hinted at. A small trucking company loses shipments on paper, but moves cash in reality. A construction firm wins a public bid at a suspiciously low price, then inflates costs through subcontractors controlled by the clan. Michele learns to make two sets of books, one for appearances, one for truth. The discipline appeals to him more than any act of violence ever could. There is a moment when he is called into a tense gathering. A senior figure accuses another of skimming profits. Michele, quietly flipping through numbers, finds the discrepancy. Instead of exposing it with drama, he whispers the solution to the clan's accountant, who corrects the figures as if it were a clerical mistake. The accusation dissolves. Michele does not smile, but he notes the shift in the room. Respect flows toward him, quiet and unspoken. Light humor slipped softly into the hush. Michele probably considered calculators to be more dangerous weapons than pistols, at least in the right hands. Do you remember the day he offered his first loan inside the clan? It was not a loan in the bank's sense. No paperwork, no contracts, but an agreement sealed with a handshake and his guarantee. The borrower repaid on time, and Michele's reputation as a reliable financier grew. From then on, men approached him not with threats but with requests. Many people still think that Michele's rise was only possible because others preferred violence and left the paperwork to him. But others argue that his skills made him indispensable, that even the most feared killers relied on his calm calculations. So what do you think? Was he merely filling a gap? Or was he quietly becoming the engine of the Casalesi economy? By the mid-1990s, Michele Zagaria speaks the clan's financial language fluently. Debts, credits, hidden investments, each number is a note in his silent symphony. While gunmen battle in alleys, he builds influence through balance sheets, binding loyalty, not with blood, but with the invisible threads of money owed. The Casalesi war years erupt like thunderclouds over Campania, reshaping every street and household. As rivalries fracture the clan, Violence spreads from Naples to the quiet fields of Caserta. Michele, by now deeply trusted as a financial operator, watches from the edges of bloodshed. He understands that each killing is more than vengeance. It is a shift in the balance sheet of power. The first war begins in the late 1980s, when Antonio Bardolino's empire splinters. Allies become enemies, and old friends become targets. Michele learns the harshest truth. No amount of mathematics can steady a clan at war. Men he once counted debts for suddenly vanish. Their names crossed off ledgers not because of payment, but because of bullets. Historical fact roots this. Bardolino himself is believed to have been killed in Brazil in 1988, sparking battles that rage for years. The Casalesi factions fight over territory, smuggling routes, and the clan's vast construction interests. Towns in Campania witness ambushes, funerals, and fear that lingers even in church pews. Michele, still preferring shadows, keeps his distance from the gunfire, but not from the consequences. He notices that chaos makes money slippery. Payments are late, businesses collapse under extortion, and trust frays like worn rope. Michele's skill lies in finding order within this disorder. He becomes the man who can track which families are aligned with which faction, which debts can be collected safely, and which should be written off quietly to avoid further bloodshed. There is one night when a cousin bursts into his home, shaken after witnessing a street shooting. Michele listens, then calmly asks, "And who will pay his debts now?" The cousin stares, horrified at his composure, but Michele shrugs. To him, violence is tragedy, yes, but it is also disruption in the accounts. Gentle humor, laid carefully. While most people hear fireworks in the distance and think celebration, Michele always thought, who's going to foot the bill this time? Do you remember when the war years turned funerals into lessons? Michele watched mothers weep, but he also noticed which coffins drew larger crowds, which deaths caused murmurs of shifting allegiances. To him, the clan's civil war was not only bloodshed, it was a living diagram of power-changing hands. Many people still think that Michele survived those years because he kept his head down, focusing only on numbers. But others suggest his neutrality was strategic, that by refusing to pick sides openly, he became valuable to all. So, what do you think? Was he simply cautious, or already playing the long game, waiting to emerge stronger once the dust settled? By the late 1990s, as the Casalesi wars burn themselves into uneasy stalemate, Michele stands intact. Others rise and fall, reputations crumble, but his grows steadier. He has proven himself indispensable, not as a killer, but as the quiet banker who keeps the empire's fractured finances alive while bullets fly outside. Friendships during those war years are not measured by laughter alone. They are measured by who stands close when bullets fly, by who dares to share bread when suspicion poisons every table. Michele, cautious yet observant, builds bonds carefully. He knows loyalty can be both shield and chain. His friendships are fewer than most men's, but they are deeper, carved by fear and necessity. Some of these bonds form with peers who, like him, prefer ledgers to pistols. Young operators who understand that an empire needs accountants as much as it needs soldiers. Together, they exchange information discreetly, keeping track of who pays tribute and who withholds it. Michele, with his sharp memory, often becomes the one they consult. A friend might ask, "Didn't that man miss a payment last year?" And Michele, without opening a notebook, supplies the answer. Historical fact frames this. The 1990s in Campania see an influx of pentiti, turncoat witnesses who shake entire clans with their testimonies. Fear of betrayal infects every relationship. Yet Michele manages to cultivate trust among a small circle. Unlike others who flaunt connections, he keeps them quiet, treating friendship like an investment portfolio, diversified, discreet, and carefully maintained. There is a story of him visiting a comrade hiding out in the countryside. Instead of discussing weapons or revenge, they talk about land deeds and straw companies. Michele's idea of camaraderie is not exchanging boasts of violence, but calculating profits while sipping bitter coffee in a farmhouse kitchen. That comrade later testifies to Michele's reliability. He never wasted words, but when he spoke, you listened. Light humor, woven lightly into the narration. Michele was probably the only man in Campania who could make a late-night hideout feel like a boardroom meeting. Do you remember how debts once sealed his reputation as trustworthy? One friend owed money, nervous about confessing, but Michele restructured the payment quietly, saving him humiliation. Loyalty sealed itself not in dramatic gestures, but in the calmness with which Michele handled another man's failure. That friend, in turn, vouched for him when whispers of betrayal circled years later. Many people still think that Michele's friendships were transactional, that no bond in the Camorra could be genuine. But others argue that survival itself required authentic loyalty, however rare. So what do you think? Did he truly care for his friends? Or were they merely tools in his grander design? By the time the war years begin to ebb, Michele has built a network not of soldiers, but of allies bound by respect. These friendships, forged in fear and silence, will anchor his ascent. They will be the threads he weaves into the vast web of trust that one day makes him the Casalesi banker in the bunker. By the mid-1990s, Michele Zagaria earns a title whispered with both admiration and envy: the banker of dirty fortunes. He has transformed from a boy tallying cigarette packets into the man who moves millions across invisible borders. Where some members of the clan gain notoriety through violence, Michele thrives in anonymity, building the Casalesi's hidden backbone. He perfects double ledgers. One shows construction contracts, invoices for cement, and wages for laborers. The other, hidden in coded notebooks, tracks the real treasure: drug revenues, extortion payments, and kickbacks from politicians. Michele understands that money is only safe when it appears boring. He makes criminal wealth look like accounting homework, an art so dull that investigators often overlook it. Historical fact grounds this. Throughout the 1990s, the Casalesi clan is deeply involved in both legal and illegal economies. They invest in construction, waste disposal, and agriculture, laundering billions through apparently ordinary companies. Italian prosecutors later uncover these networks, describing them as more sophisticated than multinational corporations. Michele is at the heart of it, designing systems that let blood-stained euros come out clean. There's a story of a marble company in northern Italy. On paper, it supplies tiles to half of Campania. In reality, few tiles are ever delivered. Instead, the company funnels cash into real estate deals abroad. Michele orchestrates these movements like a conductor guiding an orchestra. Each payment, each receipt, part of a symphony that only he fully hears. His fellow clan members begin deferring to him. A man who once carried crates now asks Michele how to hide profits from a land sale. Soldiers who wouldn't listen to a priest now wait silently as Michele explains interest rates. He is not loud, not flamboyant. His influence lies in precision, in the confidence that he can turn chaos into order. Light humor, delivered gently. While others bragged about buying flashy cars, Michele's greatest thrill may have been a perfectly balanced spreadsheet. Do you remember the day he negotiated his first major laundering scheme? A shipment of cocaine arrived through Spain, profits swelling into millions. Rather than divide cash into dangerous piles, Michele rerouted it through shell companies. Months later, the money returned as agricultural subsidies. The bosses were astonished. Michele only nodded. This, for him, was the future. Many people still think that his role as banker made him less dangerous than the killers around him, but others argue he was far more lethal, because without money, no bullet could be fired, no bribe paid, no empire built. So, what do you think? Was the banker the quietest man in the room, or the most essential? By the turn of the new millennium, Michele Zagaria is indispensable. His mastery of dirty fortunes ensures the Casalesi empire does more than survive. It thrives, growing so wealthy that the state itself struggles to tell where legality ends and Camorra begins. Concrete becomes Michele Zagaria's obsession. Not just the concrete of roads and apartment blocks, but the concrete poured underground, shaping the labyrinths that would keep him hidden for years. Building bunkers and safe havens is his answer to the constant uncertainty of Camorra life. While others rely on bodyguards and fast cars, Michele trusts walls, tunnels, and steel doors. At first, the idea seems almost absurd. Why pour fortunes into secret hideouts when luxurious villas sit waiting above ground? But Michele has learned from decades of watching raids and arrests. Villas are trophies that attract attention. Bunkers are investments that ensure survival. He designs them not as crude shelters, but as homes beneath homes. A farmhouse might look rustic on the surface, but under its floors lies a world of polished marble, air conditioning, and enough space to live comfortably for years. Historical fact grounds this. The Italian police, in later raids, uncover elaborate bunkers built by the Casalesi clan, complete with tunnels, disguised entrances, and even hydraulically operated doors. These spaces are not temporary hiding places. They are permanent residences, proof of a criminal elite planning for decades of clandestine living. Michele is the mastermind behind many of them. He consults architects, often without their knowledge. A construction worker might be hired for renovations, unaware that the floor he pours concrete for will later slide open to reveal a hidden chamber. Michele blends paranoia with ingenuity. He keeps everything compartmentalized. One man installs pipes, another lays tiles, neither aware of the full blueprint except Michele himself. There is a moment, told later by investigators, of Michele inspecting one of his underground halls. The walls gleam with marble, chandeliers hang from ceilings, and plush furniture fills the rooms. It is not a bunker of survival. It is a palace of invisibility. Michele laughs softly, remarking that even a fugitive deserves comfort. Gentle humor, in keeping with the sleepy tone. While most people worried about basements flooding, Michele worried about whether the marble tiles matched the curtains. Do you remember how his childhood taught him that family homes were both shield and trap? Now he builds his own, crafted from paranoia, ensuring that no one, not even family, fully knows his whereabouts. Trust remains essential, but concrete is more reliable than blood. Many people still think that Michele's obsession with bunkers was eccentric, a quirk of a man too cautious. But others argue it was genius, the reason he evaded capture for so long. So what do you think? Paranoia or foresight? By the late 1990s and early 2000s, Michele is not only the banker of the Casalesi fortunes, He is also the architect of their invisibility. His safe havens are as much symbols of power as the guns carried by soldiers. In the silence of marble-lined tunnels, he prepares for the years of disappearance that will define his legend. As the new millennium dawns, Michele's vision stretches far beyond the borders of Casal di Principe. The clan's local dominance is solid, but Michele sees that real power lies in connecting with international markets. European drug networks expand, and he stitches Naples to Spain, to the Netherlands, to Germany, weaving a web that makes the Casalesi indispensable to traffickers and buyers alike. Smuggling routes grow more complex. Cocaine from South America enters through Spanish ports, heroin filters through the Balkans, and synthetic drugs begin surfacing in Northern Europe. Michele is not a street-level trafficker. He is the coordinator, the banker, the man who makes sure money flows smoothly across every border. His skill lies in logistics and finance, transforming dangerous ventures into systems that feel as structured as multinational trade. Historical fact anchors this. Throughout the 2000s, Italy's Camorra clans established strong ties with Spanish and Dutch cartels, especially around Barcelona and Amsterdam. Police reports describe networks of transport companies and warehouses tied to southern Italy. Michele's fingerprints are all over these arrangements. He learns to diversify routes. If one shipment is intercepted in Valencia, another slips quietly through Rotterdam. If one driver is arrested in France, another, with clean papers, picks up the slack. It is risk management, a term used in business schools, but here applied to tons of narcotics. Michele thrives in this balancing act, understanding that resilience comes not from brute force, but from planning redundancies. There's a story told by investigators of how Michele once managed parallel shipments of tomatoes and cocaine. On paper, crates filled with produce traveled north. In reality, hidden compartments carried far more valuable cargo. Inspectors who opened boxes found nothing but fresh fruit, while the true goods passed under their noses. Michele, somewhere in the background, quietly smiled. Gentle humor softens the edges. He probably became the only man in Campania who looked at a basket of tomatoes and thought, diversified investment strategy. Do you remember the lessons from his schoolyard, where lineage outweighed fists? Now he applies the same principle internationally. He forges relationships with foreign suppliers not through flashy displays, but through reliability. Shipments arrive on time, debts are honored, and profits are shared. Trust, once again, is his currency. Many people still think that Michele's genius was only local, tied to his knowledge of Casal di Principe, but evidence shows his networks were continental, binding Spain, Italy, and beyond into one fluid economy. So, what do you think? Was he just a banker for the clan, or a quiet architect of European underworld globalization? By the mid-2000s, Michele Zagaria is no longer just hiding fortunes. He is orchestrating flows of goods and money that stretch across Europe. The Casalesi clan thrives, not only because of fear in Campania, but because their banker has turned the map of Europe into his own discrete balance sheet. Politics has always been the invisible partner of organized crime, and Michele Zagaria understands this better than most. By the mid-2000s, his influence reaches far beyond bunkers and smuggling routes. Secret ties to politicians, businessmen, and local administrators keep the Casalesi machine running. Handshakes done in dimly lit rooms decide who wins construction contracts, who receives public funds, and who looks the other way when trucks unload more than produce. In Caserta province, elections become stages where clan money flows quietly. Candidates backed by the Casalesi suddenly find resources for posters, rallies, and outreach. Michele orchestrates it all with the care of an accountant balancing a yearly budget. To him, every politician is an investment. A promise of zoning approval might be worth more than a suitcase of cash. A favorable inspector could save the clan millions. Historical fact grounds this. The Casalesi's infiltration into politics became notorious, exposed during the 2008 Spartacus trial, one of Italy's largest anti-mafia prosecutions. Investigators revealed a web of collusion between local officials and clan figures. Though Michele remained hidden, his name surfaced in whispers tied to public works, construction tenders, and quiet donations. He treats politics as he treats finance, with discretion. Instead of bribes thrown carelessly, he prefers structured arrangements. A politician's campaign receives funds. In return, a Casalesi-linked company secures lucrative contracts. Payments cycle back through shell firms. Everyone wins, at least until investigators close in. Michele never appears in photos, never signs documents, but his influence threads through the paper trail. There's a story of a mayor who once resisted. Funds were withheld, and construction crews mysteriously stalled. Roads remained half-paved, citizens grew angry, and pressure mounted until the mayor conceded. Michele didn't need threats. He used the language of delay and scarcity, tools more effective than violence, light humor, whispered like a bedtime aside. While other men in Casal di Principe debated soccer scores, Michele probably debated which zoning law could yield the best return on investment. Do you remember how he once balanced debts for family members during the war years? Now he applies the same skills to balance political loyalties. He knows which candidate can be pushed, which must be appeased, and which is too risky to touch. His system resembles chess, though he never brags. He simply moves the pieces. Many people still think that Michele's political influence was exaggerated, a product of media frenzy during the trials. But others insist his handshakes shaped entire towns, funding campaigns and steering decisions far above his bunker. So, what do you think? Was he merely a shadow in politics? Or one of the quiet architects of local power? By the late 2000s, Michele Zagaria has built more than bunkers and smuggling empires. He has built influence that stretches into the heart of politics itself. With every handshake, every discreet nod, he ensures that the Casalesi clan is not just feared in alleys, but embedded in the structures meant to govern. The manhunt begins with whispers. By the early 1990s, police and prosecutors already know Michele Zagaria is more than a quiet accountant. Arrest warrants are issued, dossiers grow thicker, and investigators circle closer. Yet Michele always seems one step ahead, like a ghost fading before dawn. His ability to disappear becomes legend, and the manhunt for him stretches across decades. At first, authorities focus on his financial dealings. Auditors pore over construction contracts, looking for the fingerprints of clan money. But Michele is careful. Two sets of books never cross paths. Companies appear legitimate, invoices are flawless, and paper trails dissolve into shadows. When investigators arrive at an office, the files are immaculate, the desks spotless, the ledgers boring. They leave frustrated, sensing the truth, but unable to pin it down. Historical fact grounds this. After the massive Spartacus trial that convicted dozens of Casalesi members, Michele is singled out as one of the clan's key fugitives. Italy's anti-mafia forces place him high on their most wanted list, alongside notorious bosses like Bernardo Provenzano and Matteo Messina Denaro. For over a decade, Zagaria remains untouchable. Raids intensify. Police storm farmhouses at dawn, tear apart walls, dig up fields. Sometimes they miss him by hours. Other times, informants provide tips that lead to empty bunkers, still warm from recent use. Each failure feeds the myth. In Casalesi Principe, people shake their heads knowingly. Zagaria knows before they even leave the station. The truth is less mystical and more methodical. Michele's network of lookouts, ordinary citizens, employees, and even sympathetic officials warn him of raids in advance. His investment in politics pays dividends here. A single phone call can buy him hours of escape time. And his bunkers, carefully scattered across the countryside, give him options at every turn. There's a story of police arriving at a farmhouse, smashing through walls, only to find an immaculate kitchen with simmering pots still warm. Michele had been there minutes earlier, sipping coffee. Neighbors swear they never saw him leave. The investigators mutter in frustration, while Michele, hidden in a tunnel below, listens calmly, perhaps amused, light humor to ease the tone. If there were frequent flyer points for police raids, Michele would have been a platinum member by the late 1990s. Do you remember how he learned silence as a child? Listening more than speaking? That silence now becomes his shield. Informants may whisper, but Michele never leaves a trace. He communicates only when necessary, often through intermediaries who never meet him twice in the same place. Many people still think that his survival came from supernatural cunning, that he had an uncanny sixth sense. But investigators now argue it was simple discipline. Layers of safe houses, trusted lookouts, and a paranoia so structured it bordered on genius. So what do you think? Ghost or strategist? By the early 2000s, Michele is no longer just a fugitive. He is a phantom the state cannot catch, a man who evades manhunts with the same precision he balances ledgers. And with each escape, his legend grows stronger. Life underground stretches from months into years, shaping Michele Zagaria into something almost mythic. While others rotate through prison cells or courtroom dramas, Michele disappears into the veins of Caserta's countryside. His hideouts are not grimy basements, but carefully designed sanctuaries. He lives in a paradox, at once trapped, yet freer than many of his pursuers. Each bunker is a different world. One lies beneath a farmhouse, its entrance hidden beneath a hydraulic trapdoor, disguised as a kitchen floor. Another hides beneath a garage, reachable only through a tunnel lined with reinforced concrete. Inside, the spaces are startling. Marble floors gleam under soft lighting. Leather sofas line the rooms, and flat-screen televisions hum with satellite channels. Michele lives not like a fugitive, but like a reclusive landlord, surveying the world through his underground palace. Historical fact anchors this. Italian police later uncover multiple Zagaria hideouts fitted with luxury amenities, air conditioning, high-quality furnishings, even libraries. His longest-known stay was beneath a farmhouse in Casapicena, where he survived for years undetected. His days underground follow a ritual. Wake late, review financial updates delivered through intermediaries, watch the news to track political tremors, then dine quietly on food prepared by loyal aides. He maintains a routine almost monastic in its discipline. Visitors are rare, limited to the most trusted associates. He knows every unnecessary contact is a risk, and yet, isolation weighs heavily. He cannot walk freely in the streets of Casalesi Principe, cannot sit in a cafe, cannot attend a family wedding. His world shrinks to walls of marble and whispers of loyalty. Still, Michele convinces himself it is worth the sacrifice. Freedom above ground would last a day. Here, in silence, he endures for years. There is a story told of him hosting a clandestine dinner underground with 2 trusted lieutenants. Fine wine, roast meats, laughter muffled by thick walls. For a moment, it feels like normalcy. Then, as plates are cleared, Michele leans back and murmurs, "This is the price of freedom." No one answers. The silence is heavier than the stone above them. Gentle humor, added with care. You could say Michele took the idea of working from home to an extreme level. His commute was only a staircase hidden beneath the tiles. Do you remember how, as a child, he learned that homes could be both shield and trap? Now, every bunker repeats that lesson. Safety surrounds him, but so does confinement. His empire thrives, but his footsteps never cross open streets. Many people still think that Michele's life underground was comfortable, a luxurious escape. But testimonies later reveal a man burdened by solitude, a prisoner of his own designs. So what do you think? Was it freedom in disguise, or the slow tightening of invisible chains? By the mid-2000s, Michele Zagaria is both absent and omnipresent. To the state, he is a fugitive. To the clan, he is still the banker, guiding fortunes from beneath the earth. And in those silent marble rooms, he shapes the legend of the Casalesi banker in the bunker. Whispers of capture attempts swirl constantly around Michele Zagaria. For 2 decades, raids come and go, each one dramatized in headlines, each one ending with the same result: nothing. The police grow frustrated, prosecutors tighten their nets, but Michele slips away like smoke through cracks in the wall. Every near miss adds to his myth, and in Casal di Principe, children grow up hearing that Zagaria is untouchable. Investigators tell stories of arriving at farmhouses to find warm coffee cups, still steaming. Dogs bark at shadows, neighbors shrug, and tunnels lie hidden just beyond the reach of a flashlight. Michele develops a reputation for vanishing seconds before officers kick down doors. To some, it feels supernatural. To others, it is meticulous preparation. Historical fact grounds this. In the 2000s, Italian authorities conducted dozens of raids across Caserta province searching for him. Despite bugging phones, following relatives, and mapping farmland, they repeatedly failed. Journalists called him Il Fantasma, the ghost. His ability to evade detection baffled even seasoned anti-mafia forces. One failed raid becomes legend. Police surround a farmhouse, confident he is inside. Hours pass as they drill through walls and floors, yet they find nothing but livestock and dust. Later, they discover a concealed exit buried beneath hay bales, leading into a neighboring property. Michele, cool as ever, had already moved to another hideout before the police arrived. There's another tale of an informant tipping off authorities. A bunker is stormed at dawn, soldiers in helmets and rifles flooding every corridor. Yet they find only a bed neatly made, a fridge still stocked, and television static humming. Michele, alerted by his network, had left hours earlier. Investigators stand in frustration, muttering that he is always un passo avanti, one step ahead. Gentle humor slipped like a wink. If there were a loyalty card for failed police raids, Michele could have traded his points for a free vacation. Though, ironically, he was already on one in his marble bunker. Do you remember how his mentors taught him that numbers were safer than guns? Here, that same precision protects him. He counts not just profits, but minutes, measuring escape routes down to the second. His life becomes a balance sheet of risks and exits. Many people still think that his escapes were luck, that the police were simply incompetent. But evidence suggests otherwise. Layers of surveillance, scouts in villages, and contacts within official offices fed him just enough warning. So what do you think? Did Michele survive by fortune or by a paranoid genius that never slept? By the late 2000s, every raid that fails makes his capture feel less possible. Michele Zagaria becomes not only a fugitive, but a legend. A man who turns every police operation into an echo of his cunning. His bunkers, his lookouts, his discipline, all combine to keep him out of reach year after year. Family in the shadows. This is the hidden cost of Michele Zagaria's empire. While he lives beneath layers of marble and steel, his loved ones walk streets watched by police, neighbors, and rivals. Every phone call, every family visit, every whispered word carries risk. Michele may be invisible, but the people tied to him cannot vanish so easily. His parents endure raids at dawn. Doors splinter, drawers empty onto the floor, photographs scattered. Officers search for letters, for signs of communication, for scraps that might betray their son's location. Michele knows this happens, and it weighs on him, but he accepts it as the unavoidable tax of loyalty. His family does not betray him, even as their daily lives collapse under suspicion. Historical fact anchors this. Investigators repeatedly surveilled Zagaria's relatives, convinced he could not survive without their support. Raids on the homes of cousins, brothers, and in-laws were common, part of the long campaign to starve him out of hiding. Yet Michele remained at large, proof of the resilience of both his network and the silence of his kin. There are moments of tenderness, even amid secrecy. A niece recalls visiting a farmhouse where an uncle guided her through a trapdoor to see Michele for just a few minutes. He hugged her, asked about her schooling, then vanished again into the underground. For her, it was both magical and terrifying. A family reunion inside a hidden chamber, but loyalty comes with costs. Relatives face charges of aiding and abetting. Neighbors risk suspicion for sharing food or delivering supplies. Michele's empire may fund comfortable bunkers, but it places heavy burdens on the shoulders of those who love him. Silence, for them, is not just protection. It is survival. There's a story of his brother once being followed for days. Police believed he was leading them to Michele. Instead, the brother went about mundane routines, groceries, errands, work. Only later did they realize Michele had already moved, using the surveillance as a distraction. Even in absence, he manipulated their movements through his family's daily rhythms. Gentle humor dropped like a sleepy aside. If loyalty points existed for keeping secrets, the Zagaria family would have had enough to trade for a free vacation, though they'd never dare take it. Do you remember how Michele's childhood dinners taught him that family was both shield and trap? Those lessons now return in sharper form. His clan protects him, yes, but their lives are also consumed by his invisibility. Their suffering is the echo of his power. Many people still think that his family supported him blindly, sacrificing their peace willingly. But others argue it was fear, not choice, that sealed their silence. So, what do you think? Were they loyal protectors or unwilling hostages of his myth? By the end of the 2000s, Michele Zagaria's name is synonymous not only with hidden wealth and bunkers, but with the suffering of loved ones. His family bears the scrutiny of the state, while he endures solitude underground. Together, they embody the dual cost of loyalty and fear, the Casalesi empire begins to show cracks under pressure. Pentiti, those who turn state's witness, start unraveling the web Michele helped weave. Courtrooms fill with testimonies, naming names once spoken only in whispers. Each confession is a hammer blow against the clan's invincibility. Michele, still buried in bunkers, reads transcripts delivered through trusted hands and knows that silence, once their greatest shield, is breaking. The Spartacus trial, launched in the late 1990s and culminating in the 2000s, delivers hundreds of convictions. Entire ranks of the Casalesi clan are sentenced to life imprisonment. Judges describe the organization as a parallel state, one of the most dangerous mafia groups in Europe. Michele is named in absentia, his absence almost theatrical. An empty chair in the courtroom, yet his shadow looming larger than many of the convicted. Historical fact grounds this. By 2008, over 600 members and affiliates of the Casalesi had faced charges, with dozens of life sentences issued. Michele remained a fugitive throughout, symbolizing the resilience of the clan despite its decapitation. Pentiti testimonies strike at his network. Former friends reveal details about construction contracts, political ties, and smuggling routes. Each story chips away at the myth of invisibility. Yet Michele adapts. Where others rage at betrayal, he calculates. If one front collapses, another must be strengthened. If one ally talks, another must be silenced. Not through violence, but through restructuring business so that their words mean little. There's a chilling detail from one testimony. A pentito recalls Michele insisting that the true strength of the clan was not in fear, but in financial continuity. As long as money moves, he allegedly said, the Casalesi never fall. That line circulates through police reports like a grim mantra, gentle humor, kept soft for the night's hush. You could say Michele believed money could outlast betrayal, almost like thinking interest rates were more reliable than friendship. Do you remember how, in his youth, he learned that lineage could end a schoolyard fight? Now, lineage alone isn't enough. His empire relies on adaptability, on reinventing structures as old ones collapse under testimonies. He becomes less visible, more abstract, less a man and more a system. Many people still think that the Pentiti destroyed the Casalesi's dominance, but others argue Michele's financial genius allowed the clan to weather the storm longer than anyone expected. So what do you think? Was betrayal the fatal wound, or just another challenge Michele absorbed into his calculations? By the late 2000s, the Casalesi are battered but not broken. Their leaders languish in prison, their soldiers scatter, yet Michele remains in his marble hideouts, orchestrating what business he can. For the police, he is the final target. For the clan, he is the last thread of continuity. Even as the Casalesi clan buckles under trials and betrayals, Michele Zagaria keeps business flowing. To outsiders, it seems impossible. How could a man living underground, cut off from public life, still control a criminal economy worth millions? But Michele proves that invisibility can coexist with command. His empire runs on trust, intermediaries, and the invisible glue of money. Every week, messengers descend into his bunkers carrying envelopes, ledgers, or simple verbal updates. They speak quickly, knowing time is dangerous, and Michele listens in silence. He rarely raises his voice, but when he does, it is not to shout, it is to calculate. Delay that payment. Move the trucks tomorrow. Split the profits 3 ways. Instructions as short as a grocery list can ripple across provinces. Historical fact grounds this. During his years as a fugitive, Zagaria was considered one of Italy's most dangerous mafia bosses, precisely because he managed to direct clan finances from hiding. Investigators discovered that he continued overseeing construction projects, agricultural subsidies, and even international smuggling routes well into the 2000s. He becomes a figure of paradox, simultaneously absent and omnipresent. Townsfolk whisper that he still decides which companies win contracts, which politicians are funded, and which shops stay open. Though they never see him, his influence lingers in every public project and private deal. To many, Michele feels less like a man than a system. There's a story from a police wiretap. An associate, frustrated by delays, mutters, "Even underground, the boss knows everything." The phrase spreads, half admiration, half complaint. Michele laughs when he hears of it, remarking that walls do not block numbers, gentle humor for the night's rhythm. You could say Michele turned working remotely into an art form long before laptops and video calls. His office just happened to be 6 meters below ground. Do you remember how he once balanced missing cigarette crates as a teenager, patching debts without drama? The same instinct now sustains the clan's wider economy. If a shipment fails, he reroutes. If funds dry up, he invents new fronts. Continuity is his obsession, because continuity, not spectacle, keeps power alive. Many people still think that the Casalesi survived those years only through violence and fear. But others argue it was Michele's steady financial hand that kept the empire alive when leaders fell and soldiers fled. So what do you think? Was he simply keeping the lights on? Or was he the last architect holding up the entire structure? By the early 2010s, Michele Zagaria stands as both fugitive and financier. Even as police tighten their grip, he continues to generate revenue, proving that a man can vanish from sight, yet remain the beating heart of a criminal empire. His bunker life eventually becomes legend, part myth, part architecture, part cautionary tale. To the outside eye, the hideouts appear to be ordinary farmhouses or warehouses, yet beneath them lie elaborate chambers designed not just for survival, but for comfort. When investigators finally uncover these underground worlds, they find marble floors, designer furniture, and hallways long enough to echo footsteps. Michele has not lived like a rat. He has lived like a hidden king. One bunker in particular, beneath a farmhouse in Casalesi, reveals his taste for detail. A hydraulic trapdoor opens to a stairwell, leading into a fully furnished home underground. There are chandeliers, televisions, and even libraries of books and films. For over a decade, this bunker shields him from raids, helicopters, and wiretaps. Each wall is a fortress, but also a canvas of his paranoia. Historical fact grounds this. In December 2011, when Michele is finally captured, police describe his bunker as a palace underground. It had modern amenities, concealed exits, and enough space for him to live in relative luxury. Journalists later compare it to the hideouts of other mafia bosses like Bernardo Provenzano and Toto Rina, yet Michele stood out for its sophistication. His daily life there is structured. He exercises in small spaces, paces long hallways, and spends hours reviewing figures brought by trusted couriers. Meals are delivered discreetly: fresh bread, cheeses, bottles of wine. Visitors are few, carefully screened, always brief. Michele prefers solitude to chatter, trusting walls and silence more than any man. There's a detail investigators recall. The bunker walls were soundproofed so effectively that neighbors above had no idea. Life above carried on with clattering dishes and barking dogs, while below, Michele watched news reports about his own manhunt. Gentle humor, tucked into the quiet. If real estate ads ever listed his property, it might have read, "Charming farmhouse with spacious underground palace, perfect for privacy enthusiasts." Do you remember how as a child he noticed which families had homes that doubled as shields? This bunker is the culmination of that instinct. He creates a home where no neighbor, no police raid, no informant can easily reach him. It is his greatest expression of both fear and genius. Many people still think that Michele built these bunkers out of vanity, wanting to live like royalty underground. But others argue they were acts of pure survival, carefully designed tools that allowed him to evade justice for over a decade. So what do you think? Were these marble-lined chambers symbols of arrogance, or the final proof of a strategist's foresight? By the late 2000s, Michele Zagaria's bunker life has become his identity. To the outside world, he is a ghost. To the clan, he remains the banker. And in those silent, echoing halls, he writes the final chapters of his fugitive legend. The final days before Michele Zagaria's arrest unfold like the slow tightening of a net around a fox that has outrun hunters for too long. By 2011, he has lived underground for more than a decade, slipping through raids, surviving betrayals, and maintaining his empire from marble-walled bunkers. Yet every fugitive knows that time is the enemy. The walls that once protected him now begin to feel like a coffin slowly closing. Italian investigators intensify their pressure. They track every relative, monitor every phone call, and scrutinize every financial movement. Years of frustration harden into obsession. To them, Michele is not just another mafia boss. He is a national embarrassment, the ghost who mocks the state with every successful escape. Historical fact anchors this. In the months leading to December 2011, authorities launched one of the most intensive manhunts in Italian history. They relied on surveillance technology, aerial mapping, and relentless raids across Caserta province. Zagaria's name was top of Italy's most wanted list, carrying the weight of international attention. In his bunker, Michele senses the tightening. He notices delays in deliveries, unfamiliar faces lingering in nearby towns, whispers of informants pointing more directly toward his hiding places. Even his most trusted allies grow nervous. Every knock at the door echoes louder. His once steady hand begins to tremble, not with fear of capture, but with the realization that the ledger of luck is almost empty. There's a story from those days. Michele reportedly watched news reports of ongoing raids on television inside his bunker, smirking at the spectacle. But as weeks passed, the smirk faded. The hunters were no longer missing him by hours. They were circling closer, learning the rhythm of his movements. The tension becomes unbearable. At night, he lies awake, listening not to silence, but to the weight of soil above his head, wondering if footsteps might descend at any moment. Friends who visit bring not just updates, but visible anxiety. Even their smiles betray cracks. Michele, the man who thrived on calculation, begins to feel the pressure of inevitability. Gentle humor subdued in the gloom. Michele might have joked once that he had lived in bunkers so long he deserved to pay property taxes on them. But even that dry wit could not soften the truth. The state was coming. Do you remember how he always insisted continuity was the secret of survival? That as long as money moved, the clan would endure? In these final days, he clings to that belief, still issuing instructions, still adjusting ledgers, as though numbers could outlast the sound of boots on stairs. Many people still think that his downfall was sudden, the product of a lucky raid. but others argue it was slow, inevitable, the result of years of relentless pursuit. So what do you think? Was it fate that caught him, or simply the law of averages finally cashing its due? By December 2011, the final hours of his freedom tick away. The banker in the bunker, once untouchable, is now a man surrounded. The marble walls that kept him safe for so long will soon echo with the footsteps of police. Dawn breaks on December 7th, 2011, and the quiet fields of Casalesi stir with the movement of men who have waited years for this day. Police vans crawl into position, officers in body armor fan out, and investigators whisper orders through radios. Beneath their boots lies the bunker where Michele Zagaria has lived like a hidden king, his marble sanctuary now a trap. For years, raids ended in frustration, but this time the intelligence is precise. Wiretaps, surveillance, and relentless pressure on his network have narrowed the hunt to this farmhouse. As drills whine and walls tremble, Michele knows the silence above is broken for the last time. He hears the thunder of boots, the crash of doors, and the clatter of voices echoing through layers of soil and concrete. Historical fact grounds this. Italian anti-mafia police captured Zagaria on December 7, 2011, in Casalesi after more than 16 years on the run. The bunker was equipped with luxury furnishings, concealed entrances, and reinforced walls. But even those defenses could not withstand the persistence of the state. Accounts from that day say Michele sat calmly when the officers broke through. His words were simple. Avete vinto voi, lo Stato ha vinto. You have won, the state has won. The statement carried no defiance, no drama. It was resignation, as though he recognized that the game he had played for decades had finally reached its final move. Neighbors gather outside as news spreads. Some cheer, relieved that the ghost haunting their town is finally gone. Others whisper regret, knowing that Michele, despite his crimes, had provided jobs, favors, and a strange kind of order. The paradox of mafia power is laid bare. He is both captor and provider, villain and benefactor, gentle humor muted against the weight of the moment. After all those years of hiding, Michele's first words to police might have been mistaken for the sigh of a man whose Wi-Fi finally went out. Do you remember how he built his bunkers to outlast raids, confident that walls would always protect him? In that moment, the marble and steel proved meaningless. What mattered was persistence, the slow, grinding patience of the state. Many people still think that Michele's arrest ended the Casalesi's influence, but investigators caution that structures he helped build continue to shape politics and business. So what do you think? Was December 7th the true end of his empire, or merely the closing of one chapter in a story still unfolding? By the time the sun sets on that winter day, Michele Zagaria, the banker in the bunker, is no longer a fugitive. He is escorted into custody, his myth intact, his silence unbroken, his empire shaken but not erased. The ghost has been caught, though the echoes of his shadow will linger for years. Shockwaves ripple through Italy in the hours and days after Michele Zagaria's arrest. News broadcasts replay the footage of his capture again and again, officers leading him out of the farmhouse, his face calm, almost detached. Headlines declare the fall of the Casalesi's last great fugitive. For prosecutors, it is a triumph. For journalists, it is the closing of a chapter that had kept readers hooked for decades. For Casal di Principe, it is a reckoning. In Rome, government officials praise the operation as proof of the state's strength. The Prime Minister calls it a victory for legality, police chiefs describe it as the culmination of years of relentless pursuit. The images of a man once described as untouchable, now seated quietly in custody, become symbols of persistence, overcoming fear. Historical fact grounds this moment. Zagaria's arrest in 2011 followed a 16-year fugitive career, making him one of Italy's most wanted men. His capture came only months after Antonio Iovine, another Casalesi boss, was arrested, signaling a collapse of the clan's top leadership. But in Caserta province, the reactions are mixed. Some celebrate, relieved that a man who represented decades of intimidation is finally gone. Others mutter uneasily, worried about instability. Michele, for all his crimes, also controlled the flow of money, jobs, and construction contracts. Without him, uncertainty fills the air. His presence was oppressive, but his absence creates a vacuum. The shockwaves extend into business and politics. Contracts once filtered through his networks now fall into scrutiny. Politicians once linked to him scramble to distance themselves. Journalists descend on Casal di Principe, interviewing residents who speak cautiously, their words measured even after his arrest. The shadow of fear does not vanish overnight. There is a story of a bar in town where locals gathered the evening of his capture. The television showed his face, weary yet composed. One man raised his glass and said, "He lived like a ghost, and ghosts don't die. They linger." The room fell silent. Gentle humor whispered against the gravity. Someone joked that Michele's marble bunker might soon become a tourist attraction. Airbnb, stay where the boss hid, Wi-Fi included. Do you remember how Michele once insisted that continuity was the clan's lifeblood? His arrest tests that belief. Police celebrate the fall, but remnants of his systems continue to hum beneath the surface. Money does not vanish with a single arrest. It follows the paths he carved for decades. Many people still think that his capture marked the end of the Casalesi, but scholars argue their influence persists, their networks adapting even without Michele at the helm. So what do you think? Was his fall the true death of an empire, or simply the quiet transfer of power to younger hands? By the close of 2011, Italy has witnessed one of its most symbolic arrests. Michele Zagaria, the banker in the bunker, is no longer a phantom. Yet the legacy of his numbers, his bunkers, and his silence continues to haunt Casal di Principe and beyond. And now, as the story of Michele Zagaria settles into memory, let's let the tension ease. The marble walls, the echoing bunkers, the endless manhunts, fade them into soft shadows. Picture the streets of Casal di Principe, not as battlegrounds, but as quiet lanes at dusk, where laundry sways gently above cobblestones and the scent of bread drifts from kitchen windows. The noise of raids, the weight of fear. Let it dissolve into silence. Breathe slower. Imagine Michele's underground palace emptied, its chandeliers unlit, its marble floors gathering dust. What once was a fortress now stands hollow, a monument to both ambition and paranoia. Above ground, life goes on. Children chase balls through courtyards. Shopkeepers arrange fruit under striped awnings. Old men sip coffee and argue about football. The empire that once felt eternal is only another chapter, filed away with so many others. Let your shoulders soften. The story has carried us through tension, secrecy, and long years of evasion. Now it returns us to calm, to reflection. Michele Zagaria's legend may still whisper in Caserta, but for us tonight, it is only a tale fading into quiet. His bunkers may have been designed to outlast the state, but no wall outlasts time. Close your eyes and imagine the hush of a countryside night, the hum of insects in fields, the distant bark of a dog, the soft rhythm of your own breathing. Let the story fade into this stillness, carrying no weight except the comfort of knowing it has ended. Rest now. Sleep deeply. The banker in the bunker is gone and silence remains.